Vikas Pota, I'm the Chief Executive of the Varkey Gens Foundation. On the 50th anniversary of Barham in Gens Education, we gave birth to the Varkey Gens Foundation, a foundation that is actually concerned with global teacher capacity building. So as Jay mentioned, we have programs where we fund other organizations on things like making sure that girls learn STEM subjects more effectively. We also have our own low-cost, high-impact teacher training program, which is currently taking place in Uganda, where by the next Easter we hope to have trained 5,000 public school teachers. Our ambition is that we train over 250,000 teachers over the next 10 years in ensuring that performance in the classroom is improved. As you know, we can get as many kids into school, but the real issue is that what's the point if they can't read or write? So teacher capacity building is very important. But today we're here because of another strand of our work that we've embarked on. We believe that investing in research, original research, and using our convening power to make sure that stakeholders come together to actually think about all the key issues in education are very important. So for example, next March we have a Global Education and Skills Forum that takes place in Dubai, in the UAE, where we hope that participants and stakeholders from the private sector, the public sector, and the voluntary sector all come together to debate and discuss and come up with innovative solutions as to how we can make sure that every child is in school and learning well. But most importantly, we also embarked on this strategy to make sure that we commission original research. And you see the booklets on your chairs, which is a Global Teacher Status Index. We know that status is very important. We know that respect for teachers is an important thing instinctively. But whereas there's a body of evidence that shows that if you pay teachers better, you get better outcomes, we also know that if you get the brightest teachers or graduates into teaching, you improve education outcomes. What we don't know, and the effort is in trying to understand the cultural aspects when it comes to making sure that student performance improves in the classroom. So to measure status and respect, we thought would be a very worthy cause for our foundation to be engaged in. And that's why we've embarked on this process. So before, the format of today is that we have a panel discussion that will be taking place. We have some esteemed educational policy experts and as well as educationalists. But before I do that, I want to ask you a question. In the spirit of the poll that we commissioned, I want to ask you, do you think today, and please raise your hands if you agree, do you believe today that respect for teachers has actually declined in comparison to the time when you were in school? So if you agree with that statement, please put your hands up. It's quite interesting. I would put it at about 60% agree with that statement. I see our friend England Rothschild did put his hand up, so you believe respect is still there. It is higher today. So when we think about these issues, it's very important that you commission the right people to make sure that they spend time understanding this issue. So the first person I'd like to invite on stage, and please applaud when he comes, is Professor Peter Dolton, the author of our report. Professor Dolton. Professor Dolton teaches at the University of Sussex and is also a research fellow at the London School of Economics. The second person I want to invite to stage is someone who I think all of us will know. And when you think about public policy and when you think about education reform, he's been very much at the forefront of making sure that these debates get the focus that is demanded. So can you please join me in welcoming Lord Andrew Adonis to the stage. Now, when you go around the world, you go to some great cities of the world. You go to Paris, you go to New York, you go to Tokyo, you go to Hong Kong. You know, competitiveness of cities is very important. And so we're delighted that today we have the Deputy Mayor for London, who's in charge of education, with us today. Please welcome Munira, Mirza, please. Especially because she comes out of her maternity leave to join us today. The last person I want to invite, and as you can see, the panel is packed with people who debate education all day long. But it's actually important to get the school leader voice or the teacher voice with us here today as well. And my friend Karen Giles is the head teacher of Barham Primary School in Wembley, and I've asked her because, like most teachers, they have an opinion. So I'd like to invite her to the stage as well. So before we commence our discussion, I would like to ask Professor Dolton, who is the author of our report, to use the next few minutes to actually frame the discussion for today. Professor Dolton.
I'm used to standing up. Okay. Before I say anything about the research, first of all, I'd like to commend Varkey for sponsoring this research. It allowed me to lead a team of truly innovative piece of research of international caliber, which demonstrates a far-sighted commitment to education and pupil attainment and learning across the world, and also to its improvement. So before we begin, I'd like to thank Vikas and all his team who have worked incredibly hard to get this report on your seats before we start. So this research we've just published represents a real first. No one's ever really tried to understand teacher status before in this way. What is it? How does it relate to teachers' pay? What's its role, teacher status role, in educating our pupils? And does it relate to pupil outcomes? Does it make things better? So what did we do? We took a survey, a web-based survey of 21,000 people from 21 countries around the world to assess perspectives on teacher status, teacher respect, and teacher pay. We were very innovative in how we did this. In fact, you can go on the website and check it out for yourself because it's still there. We designed a questionnaire which was really quite unusual, and I'd like to thank Populous, the survey company, for their help in creating a truly innovative piece of work. They did an excellent job. So, in the course of doing this, we actually got about 500,000 data points, which is a massive data. So what you've got is a very brief summary of the main findings. How did we choose the countries we actually examined? Well, first of all, we wanted a representative set of cultures from around the world. And we want this to be backed up with OECD education at a glance data, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, because we wanted to be able to link to international data on PISA, TIMSS and PIRLS attainment test scores from pupils. What did we ask about? We asked about teacher status, of course. We asked about comparable occupations to teachers. What do people think they're paid? What do they think they ought to be paid? And then we confronted them with what they're actually paid in their own country and said, do you think this is fair, more than fair, less than fair? We asked them if they wanted their own children to be teachers. We asked them if they trust their teachers. We asked them about what they thought of the educational standards of their own country relative to other countries. And we also asked them about performance-related pay and what they thought of trade union power. Why does all this matter? Well, it matters because we want the best education for our pupils that we can get. And because we want the best for them, then we want to recruit the most able people into teaching to teach our children. And what we need to know is, what role does teacher pay, and teacher status play in ensuring the best outcomes for our pupils? What did we find? We found that teacher status differs hugely across the world. There are massive cultural differences and factors which determine teacher status. And we looked at the relationship between teacher status and earnings as a very subtle one. And what we found is, to many political commentators, this may not sit easy. What we found is that there's no political easy fix for educationists, political free lunch. That is to say that we can't just raise teacher status and expect that everything else would be all right without raising pay or without changing teaching conditions. That won't just be the easy fix which gives us raised pupil performance. We need to be much cleverer and subtle about it. What we do know, though, is that relative teacher pay actually does make a difference for pupils. And all these things are really the first times anyone's studied this in this detail. And what you get when you look at OECD publications is a massive data on each system and outcomes, but you don't get a lot of the factors that we've actually been studying here.
What are the standout findings? Many people think that teachers ought to be paid more. Interestingly, around at least 60% of people in each country thought that performance-related pay for teachers was a good idea. In many countries, they also had quite a dim view of teachers' unions, thinking that they maybe had certain amounts of too much power with respect to determining pay and their conditions. We also asked about what, if you had to compare teachers to one other occupation, what would you most compare it to? And interesting responses. So in the US, the response was they're closest to librarians. In Japan, the answer was they're closest to local government managers. In most other countries of the world, it was social workers. In China, it was doctors. This tells us a lot about how teachers are respected in different countries in the world. This seems to be the key, cultural differences. And so over the last week, as this report's been publicised, quite a few people have asked me, so why does China come out top of your index? And if you look, you'll see it does. To which I have a little short story. I have a Chinese PhD student who comes to see me regularly on a weekly basis for her PhD supervision. And it was pretty remiss of me, but I eventually noticed that she hadn't ever sat down in my office. So I pulled up the chair and said, take a seat. She said, no. I said, why don't you ever take a seat in my office? She said, I must always stand in the presence of my professor. You cannot believe that any UK student would ever say that to me. Okay, so where do we go next? In economics, when we give a talk, we always ask, the first question is, so what? Why does it matter? What do we do next? What do we do about it? In response, let me read you a quote, which is a little bit long, but I think it contains the real essence of what we should mean by teacher status, because when we struggle to define it, I only discovered this literally this morning, would you believe? There are laudatory motives in seeking professional status for one's job. There is the desire to raise professional competence. There is the desire to rule out charlatans, so that the public is protected by guarantees of one sort or another, because the profession assumes duties as well as claims and privileges. These benefits are conferred on the public by the imposition of admissions standards, as well as tribunals to judge non-professional behaviour and in-service training. So there are many criteria for which an occupation will be decided to be a profession. The first of these is the ability to impose those admission standards, get the right people, in other words, and teaching is a profession which falls far short in this person's judgment of the powers exercised by doctors, dentists, lawyers and accountants. And he says, I suggest this is a matter of urgency, that teachers have the task ahead of them of seeking professional status and seeking a role in educational decision-making which is greater than they play at the moment. This was written by Lord John Vasey 50 years ago. 50 years ago. Things have not changed very much. There's lots of things we can do to make things change for the better. So in conclusion, I would say two things. Firstly, from that quote, I think it comes across to me that we need to make teaching a true profession and pay it accordingly and give it the right status and get the right people into the job. That, I think, is absolutely essential. The other thing I'd say is we need to be clever, we need to be smart. We need to think about the most efficient way of spending our educational resources to provide the best bang for our buck. In these recessionary times, we need to be very clear about how we spend our resources to secure best education. And it doesn't mean necessarily spending more, it means thinking about, in a world of unlimited, very limited resources rather, we need to be smart about how we actually do it. In other spheres, the phrase frugal innovation is common currency. And in this context, it means learning what's the best mix of class sizes, educational spending, computers and other hardware, teacher pay, etc., to find the best and most efficient system for our children. We owe it to them. This is the next thing on my research agenda. Thank you.